Welcome to this lesson with Aberystwyth University, everyone. The purpose of this lesson, it's meant to be a win-win-win situation. So you get to find out a little bit more about what it's like to be taught at a university. You get an introduction into to inflation, which hopefully will be helpful for your current studies. And a win-win situation then. And it's a chance for us to show off Aber Uni as well. So win-win-win. We're joined here by Dr. Lyndon Murphy, who's part of Aberystwyth Business School, part of Aberystwyth University, an expert in economics. So without further ado, I'd like to pass you over to Dr. Lyndon Murphy.
Hello there, everybody. I can see some of you there sitting in your coats, so hope it's not too cold on this rather grey sort of December afternoon. So the plan basically is, in a moment I'm going to share my presentation with you, and then we're going to have some time at the end of the session for fielding any questions, and it could be questions about deflation, so we can have today's topic, or there could be questions about university life or Aberystwyth. So it's a bit of an open forum at the end of the class, if that's okay. So I'll share my slides with you now. So we've got 14 slides, so it isn't going to be too onerous, I hope. We'll have some questions at the end, but if you've got a burning desire to ask a question, please ask a question during the presentation. So the title for today's class is Deflation. What is it, and why does it matter? I think it's the why does it matter that we're really interested in. So it's my understanding from Daniel that you've covered quite a few aspects in terms of inflation, with some of the causes, cost push and demand pull. So we're not really going to go over any of that in terms of inflation, so we're focusing on deflation. So introduction, we're going to start off with a definition, have a look at some of the causes, effects, and some of the solutions. And we're going to have a look at some future trends, not so much possibly of deflation, but some future current news, if you like, about inflation. And then finish off with a summary and some questions. So that's what we've got planned. So let's hope that we actually achieve some of those outcomes. Okay, first up is definition. Quite some simple definitions there firstly from Sloman and Jones. Negative inflation is falling prices. It's a rate of inflation that falls below 0%. And a little definition there from Berg et al. When the price level is falling. So I've got a link there, which I'm not going to click on the link, but I'll forward the slides onto Daniel, and I'm sure he'll be able to share the slides with you, so you can click on this. It's just a very simple definition there from the Bank of England. Okay, some of the causes. Well, some of the causes are many and varied, largely around falling aggregate demand. Could be something around a global recession, as was experienced around the financial crisis, 2007, 2008. Could be a tightening of monetary policy in terms of making credit more expensive, or to make credit less widely available. Could also be a tightening of fiscal policy, possibly reductions in government spending and or increases in taxation. So there's less money available for people to spend, or a sort of a recurring theme, really, that of confidence. That can be consumer confidence, it can be business confidence, and that's one of the reasons why deflation is such. It's considered by some economists to be, if you like inflation's enemy number one, and some economists consider deflation to be enemy number two. They see it as being that much of an issue, and it's one of the reasons why that is confidence, consumer and business confidence. Other causes can be low production costs, which obviously can be good news, or frequently is good news. So you have lower oil prices, improved technology, so that could be technological developments and or improved uses of technology. It could also come from currency appreciation, and currency appreciation, what typically happens there is the cost of imports falls, and that would have downward pressure on prices, either in terms of imported finished products, but more importantly, imported components and raw materials, which would have lower production costs. And then improvements in productivity. Productivity is usually measured as output per worker. So that could be the workers becoming more productive in terms of their education, skills, training, and also, as I just mentioned, the use of technology. Okay, so we've got some of our diagrams, which we love in economics, obviously. Helps us in when we're writing essays and in exams. And you can see there, the diagram labeled number 1 there, falling aggregate demand. And we can see aggregate demand falling from AD1 to AD2. And then you can see the price level falling from P1 to P2. And the real GDP there falling from Y1 to Y2. The long run average supply curve there is shaped in that way because as firms reach sort of as firms reach a certain level of capacity, the long run average supply curve becomes can become more inelastic, or in this case becomes more elastic, and prices, as you can see, prices are falling there. So the shape of the long run average supply curve is due to elasticity and changes in elasticity. So with falling prices, it could be the case that we have the elasticity of supply becomes more elastic, and if we had the other case, it would become more inelastic. So the curve becomes steeper. And then number 2 there, lower cost of production. We can see the short run average supply curve move from SRAS1 to SRAS2. And we can see then an increase in real GDP, and we have a fall in prices there. So where there's a fall in aggregate demand, a lower cost of production, we can see that prices are falling, but there's a difference there in terms of what happens to the real GDP. So a fall in real GDP with fall in aggregate demand, and an increase in real GDP with lower cost of production. So the message there is that deflation isn't all bad. Deflation can result from lower cost of production, and that can help obviously then with the competitive of a country, which would be a big, could be a huge help. Okay, so I think one of the crucial things to bear in mind in economics is that much of economics is down to us, the likes of you and I, as individual decision makers. Do we decide to spend? Do we decide to save? Do we decide to, where do we decide to work? What kind of work would we like to do? So it's often about our resource allocation decisions. We as individuals and collectively are the most powerful force in an economy. And the issue with deflation, and this is why it's sort of enemy number 2 behind inflation, is that deflation can damage our confidence and our expectations of what's likely to happen in the future. So falling prices may typically result in lower consumer and business confidence, which may lead to lower spending and could lead into even further falling prices. Falling prices may lead to lower wages. Now that depends a lot on the power of trade unions. It depends on the political environment in a particular country. In Ireland, for example, in I think it was 2010, the government and trade unions negotiated lower nominal wages, and that improved the competitive nature of the Irish economy, and it helped pull Ireland out of a deflationary situation. And that was, I'm sure that was a very difficult thing to do, for people to negotiate lower wages. Politically, it's very a sensitive area, and obviously a very sensitive area for people as individuals. Falling prices may also lead to people delaying their purchases, because if they expect prices to fall, why buy today at a higher price when tomorrow or in a few weeks' time prices could be even lower? And that comes back to the top of the slide there, the self-fulfilling prophecy. You're sort of prophesizing, you're predicting, you're forecasting prices will fall. So you wait, you take yourself out of the market, and lo and behold, prices may fall. So you're part of this self-fulfilling prophecy. That works in reverse, obviously, with classic situation is house prices. People expect house prices to rise, so they buy a house today, say, in the hope they will increase in value in the future. So that's an example of self-fulfilling prophecy in the other direction. And I think one of the sort of issues in the last bullet point there, price signal. One of the sort of issues that we don't often see mentioned, I think, with deflation is the notion of the price signal. You and I, we know how important price is. And one of the reasons why price is so important is the signal between us as consumers and the firms. And as we all know, if prices are rising, say the price of houses are rising, it acts as a signal to house builders to build more houses. And that works in reverse. If prices are falling, it acts as a signal to the firms to question whether or not they should continue supplying that particular product or service to the market. So deflation, because price is so important to us, is central to how market economies and mixed economies work. can't underestimate the pricing and the power of price. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the countries currently experiencing deflation. I hope this will still share with you, so let's give it a go. We can now see the International Monetary Fund data mapper for inflation. And if we look around the world, we've got different sets of figures. For the UK there, it reads United Kingdom 0.8. I think the most recent figures are 0.7. I think the IMF's figures are more of an average across the year. But let's have a look at some countries in the world where there is deflation. Got Ireland there, minus 0.2, Spain 0.2, Malaysia, Thailand 0.4, and in Malaysia at minus 1.1. Now those kinds of figures shouldn't be overly problematic, and they shouldn't be overly problematic because, well, we'll see in a moment in some of the solutions, but those figures shouldn't set the alarm bells ringing. You've got the rest of the world. You've got North America was 1.5. So you've got to bear in mind, sorry, that UK's target, as you know, I'm sure you know, is 2%, so it's below the target. One part of the world that's having severe problems at the moment is Venezuela, with 6,500% inflation, and obviously that presents, as I'm sure you would have seen from your inflation classes, that presents a huge problem. Okay, so countries currently experiencing deflation. We've just mentioned Ireland, Spain, Thailand, and Malaysia. None of those countries you would say, that's going to set the alarm bells ringing, but if it was to continue a deflationary sort of cycle, as we've just seen, then that could cause some real problems. So some of the effects of deflation: consumers delay purchases. We've just mentioned this: falling prices, expect prices to be lower in the future, so put off purchasing goods. A rise in the real value of debt. So if, obviously with falling prices, and if we have falling wages, and the employment market, more people become unemployed, it will become harder to pay off debt. And the reason for that is because the debt that you incur, say you borrow £10,000 at a fixed interest rate, you still have to pay off the debt of £10,000, and you'll still be paying the fixed interest rate. So what you're paying back, even though your wages may have fallen, the prices of other commodities may have fallen as well. What you're paying back is still what you were paying back when prices were higher. So it's the real value of the debt increases, and that can be a problem for individuals and for businesses, obviously. Real wage unemployment. So if prices fall, businesses may lay off workers, and some countries, like in Ireland, workers sometimes faced be made redundant or accepting nominal wage cuts. And the nominal wage cut is what you actually get paid, as opposed to the real wage cut, which obviously takes into account inflation. So if workers accept nominal wage cuts, and that is very difficult, because we've just seen in the previous slide about real debt, levels of the real value of debt. If you have a mortgage and you're still paying your mortgage, you're still paying a fixed interest on your mortgage, and then somebody comes along and says, we want you to have a cut in your wages, understandably, people typically resist that. Okay, so that can be really problematic. A deflationary cycle, well, we've just looked at that, and it creates this vicious circle. And it's very difficult because of expectations and that loss of confidence, as we just mentioned, to come out of that. It can also contribute to lower economic growth, and we saw that in our diagrams when aggregate demand fell. Again, there's another reason there, because it increases the real value of debt, which we just discussed on the previous slide, because you still have to pay your debts, and what you're paying is affected. Well, sorry, what you're paying in absolute terms is unaffected, but what its real value has increased. There's some benefits of deflation. Well, we mentioned increased productivity. I suppose that's more closely linked to lower production costs. So if prices are falling, then production costs may fall. If nominal wages fall, for example, that'll help reduce production costs. If imports are cheaper, and price of imports obviously push down they won't necessarily push down finished product prices. It depends if businesses pass that on to the consumers. But it could then result in improved international competitiveness. That's what happened in Ireland. The Irish policies in terms of negotiating falls in nominal wages helped improve, amongst other factors, international competitiveness, and that helped the Irish economy to recover. Okay, so we've looked at some of the causes of deflation. We've looked at some of the effects of inflation. Now we're going to have a look at some of the solutions to deflation. And one of the solutions is looking at deflation in a proactive way. And one of the ways you can look at deflation in a proactive way is through the monetary policy target of inflation at 2%. The government in the UK, the Bank of England, the Monetary Policy Committee in the Bank of England, they could set a target of 0% for inflation, but that doesn't give any slack then in terms of responding to deflation. So 2% is a bit of a sort of traffic light system. So it gives you some slack. So if inflation starts to fall below 2%, it gives the government and Monetary Policy Committee an opportunity to respond before we experience deflation. So that traffic light sort of system, that warning system, can help avoid deflation. Other solutions would be to loosen fiscal policy, so the government could spend more and/or lower taxes. In the UK, obviously the current situation, the government is planning to spend more, and it's increasing the level of debt. Because taxation is comparatively low with some countries, especially some European countries, the government obviously is looking to help service its debt, may be reluctant to lower taxes further. Looking at then some monetary policy could be reduce interest rates, but interest rates are already at record low levels at 0.1%. The government in the UK has turned to quantitative easing, which involves the Bank of England electronically creating money and then buying corporate bonds, which creates an income for businesses which they may decide to spend or to invest. And then one of the sort of ways out of deflation, which helped countries like Japan, is to have buoyant export markets. So your export markets may help you pull you out of a deflationary situation. So those are some of the solutions. So just as fiscal policy can cause deflation, fiscal policy can help pull a country out of deflation. And just as monetary policy can cause deflation, it can help pull a country out of a deflation situation. But it's the bullet point at the bottom there, I think, can give lots of countries hope in terms of deflation because of globalization. So as long as there isn't a global recession, as we saw, which was one of the causes of deflation earlier, as long as a country has buoyant export markets that can help pull a country out of a deflationary situation. So it's all linked together. One of the issues, I suppose one of the elephants in the room, is around political interference in economic policy. And political interference in economic policy can at times limit the options countries have to remedy deflation. I won't discuss that any further. It's just that sometimes countries don't do what's in the best interest economically. Okay, so current inflation activity. I thought we'd look at what's currently happening. I know we've temporarily moved away from deflation. Just going to look at some current inflation sort of aspects. So I mentioned earlier, inflation is currently at 0.7%, and that's up, I think, from the previous figures of September, October time, which were 0.5%. So that's a boost there, and we'll have a look what's contributed to that boost at the moment when we have a look at what's happening on the Office for National Statistics website. Sea transport costs. It's been in the news today about sea transport costs. Because of the pent-up demand due to the pandemic, countries like the UK are attracting a lot more imports in terms of the pent-up demand, especially on Christmas time. But that apparently has contributed to a world shortage of containers. So we've all seen these huge ships transporting hundreds of containers, packed full of a whole range of different consumer goods and components, etc. But because of a shortage of containers, it's damaging the supply chain, and it's increasing shipping costs because there's an increase in demand for containers and there's increased demand for shipping. So that's helping push up prices. There's also issues at some British ports like Felixstowe and Southampton, where ships are now charging congestion charges. So it's helped pushing up prices. So that could have an effect, obviously, in terms of imports, which could then have a knock-on effect then to consumer prices. And then the other elephant in the room, just mentioned that phrase, is Brexit. We've got 25% of food eaten in the UK comes from the European Union. And some forecasters, people from the Lyndon School of Economics, have recently forecast that prices of unbranded food could increase with a deal by 4.7%, of unbranded foodstuffs, and without the deal could increase by 12.5%. So there are some inflationary pressures, arguably it's just sort of offshore, and also the value of the pound has been fluctuating with the Brexit negotiations, and any fall in the value of the pound, it would likely then to increase import prices. So there's some potential sort of issues there. I won't click on that link there because it might cause another sort of delay in the presentation. But what's mentioned there in the Office for National Statistics is that there have been some increases recently in prices, and it's been around some things like I think furniture prices, prices of carpets have increased, as well as some food as well. So there are these pressures, and it's also well documented that people are buying more in preparation for Christmas. Christmas trees have increased in price, etc. as well. So yeah, there are those kinds of pressures currently in the wings, if you like, in terms of inflation. But with an inflation target of 2%, obviously the government would welcome an increase in the rate of inflation. Not too much, obviously. Okay, on to the summary. Well, we've looked at some of the causes, and some of the causes around aggregate demand and aggregate supply. We've looked at some of the effects, especially looking at this deflationary cycle, which could lead to lower demand, which will then affect economic growth, possibly affect levels of employment, and crucially, confidence, business confidence, and business decisions to invest and not to invest in the future. Consumer confidence, decisions whether to spend or to save. And it can be very difficult, as Japan experienced in the 1990s and into the early and into the 2000s as well, experienced a lot of difficulty there trying to break out of this deflationary cycle. What are some of the solutions? Well, the solutions typically involve around injecting money into the economy, either through fiscal policy or monetary policy. And also there's that kind of export expectation that if there are buoyant export markets, then countries can be pulled out of this deflationary situation. Future trends, well, we've mentioned some of what's currently happening in the UK with Brexit and sea transport. So there's more inflationary pressure than deflationary pressure, and many of the forecasts, as you'll have seen, the Chancellor of the Exchequer gave his spending review a couple of weeks ago. The economy is forecast to grow, especially in the latter part of 2021, and then to grow beyond that as the world comes out of the pandemic. But then the UK's got Brexit, and clearly, obviously, the current negotiations are going to have a huge impact on inflation or deflationary pressure. So, thank you very much. I'm really sorry that I couldn't be there. This is a very artificial situation. I'm just talking to a screen. I don't know if you're interested, disinterested, engaged, not engaged, so I'm going to clue what's going on in Gower College. But thank you for your patience. And do we have any questions, please? Well, I think that's a huge question. It's an excellent question. I think that although unemployment is forecast to grow. I mean, I think some of the forecasts were up to something like 7% in some cases. That may, I know it's an obvious point I'm going to make, but that may or may not be realised because of this. I believe there's still a lot of pent-up demand with the pandemic, but obviously it depends, I suppose. If there's that kind of pent-up demand and people are demanding more goods and services, but because people lost their jobs, businesses are not able to respond that quickly to that pent-up demand. The pent-up demand may suck in more imports, and it depends, what's happening with the exchange rate as a result of Brexit. But also that may push up. It may push up wage rates in the UK, possibly, as businesses then seek to re-employ people. I suppose really it depends where the jobs are lost in the economy, what kind of industries the jobs are lost. It also depends where in locations the jobs are lost as well. So it depends where the unemployment happens. It also depends on the pent-up demand that may or may not be there. It probably is, and how quickly can the firms respond to changes in demand. Yeah. Again, that's an excellent question. That's sort of if you look at what households typically spend money on, a big proportion of what households spend money on is accommodation. So throughout the pandemic, they've still been paying for their paying for their accommodation. They also spend money on food, and some people have been hoarding food, especially tin food and dried food. So when we come out of the pandemic, people may use up their existing stocks of food. So that may, Tesco's, for example, have done quite well in terms of the demand for their products, and other supermarkets have done well. At some stages during the pandemic, they've done extremely well. But will demand temporarily fall off for some of their products as people use up their stocks of tinned food and dried food, etc.? But people also spend money on leisure, and they spend money on luxury goods. And because of people may have concern about their job security, and obviously much of the leisure sort of industry has been shut down during lockdowns. People's luxuries like sort of holidays, etc., and luxury goods, people may not have purchased those. So there's likely to be pent-up demand for certain parts of the economy, like hospitality, like holidays, like luxury goods. But there may be an over demand, if you like, for some necessities like food, for instance. It's just going to depend, in answer to the question, it's just going to depend on people's expectations for the future, people's confidence, and the likelihood is that certain areas like hospitality, like leisure, like tourism will explode as people go out, eat, drink, socialize, travel. But then, you look at what's happened with some of the airlines, they've contracted. Will there be sufficient capacity for that kind of growth? Will prices increase for airline tickets and so on? So I think there's more likely to be inflationary pressure in the economy. But it depends on how people react. Yeah, I think that's excellent. I think that's an excellent question, an excellent observation. It depends which is the most powerful force. So if you've got a situation whereby aggregate demand is falling because people are losing their jobs, and then consumer confidence is really damaged, as you might find in a depression. and you get into this cycle of everything contracting, then that may be such a powerful force that will still push prices down. But that's an excellent observation, and in terms of the law of demand, and that's one of the ways in which countries can come out of a deflationary situation, is that the law of demand sort of that sort of kicks in as a more powerful force, if you like, because market economists, they'll tell us that the market has all the solutions, and that when prices fall, those commodities will become more attractive to buy, as you've seen the law of demand, and that can help pull a country out of deflation. But it all depends on the power of particular forces that are at work. But that's an excellent observation. That's an excellent point. Thanks for that. Can I thank you for the opportunity? Thank you, Daniel, and thank the students at Gower College for the opportunity. And I've got to say, I was really impressed with the questions. I really was impressed, and I really mean that. If you go on to study economics in any university, you keep on asking questions like that, and you'll do well.